Are we good to go?
Mr. Mike Diverse.
Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Welcome to Lansing Online News Radio. I'm Bonnie Bucqueroux, joined by my co-host Bill Castaner.
Happy Valentine's Day.
We're here at WLNZ Lansing, 89.7 on the dial, here in the bowels of the LCC Learning Center, and it is a nice warm day out there. I think maybe spring is here, Bill. Maybe Valentine's Day is
You must not have heard the
brighter
news
day.
update. It's supposed to be 10 tonight.
Well, but that's better than we've had.
Yeah, it was 0.
Yeah,
It was
so,
0.
I
And it
mean-
was sunny today. It was pleasant.
Things are melting at my house. My driveway's turning to slush. I have a half-mile dirt drive, as you well know, so that gets exciting this time of year. Other people are doing fine and loving the fact that everything's thawing. I keep wondering how I'm going to get buried to the axle, so makes life a bit
As long as
exciting.
you've got a good base, I guess, right?
That's what they keep
Stone.
saying.
Yeah.
That's what they keep saying. Plenty of things happening in the news, though. One of the things that one interest that Bill and I share is a lot of interest in new media, and we'll be talking a little bit about that. But for our Valentine's Day show, we do have some special features. We're going to be talking first with playwright Sandra Seaton, and she's going to be talking a bit about the one famous love story we'll tell you a bit about, and maybe one of the more unusual love stories in our history, in our country. Then we'll be joined by poet Sam Mills, who's going to give us the benefit of some of his love poems, and he said not the dirty ones, not the ones that when they do some of the sessions over there in Old Town, they get a little raunchy.
He's not going to bring his heat tonight.
Not going to bring the heat game tonight. But the big news in the last week for us new media fans is the new merger between AOL and Huffington Post. And it is either, boy, what a wonderful opportunity for Arianna Huffington to take over the world and have resources to make all these innovations in new media, or my God, Arianna sold out.
Plus, she walks away with a large sum of money.
The deal is $315 million. There's still discussion about how it's going to be structured. One of the big questions is, will AOL actually end up making money on the deal, or is it a bad bet for them? They've had such a wonderful track record, as we all know. They bought Time Warner once and then pretty quickly found out that it should have been the other way around.
You know, what I think what'll be interesting is HuffPo had kind of morphed into a real popular site anyway, but I mean it was a pop culture site.
It started
More
out
than
as-
a left-leaning site anymore. They had a few distinguished writers that were left-leaning, populist, but it became pop culture to me.
Well, they started out as the alternative to the Drudge Report, which was basically an aggregator site. It isn't that Drudge wrote any original copy, he did very little. It was that he collected links to media around the world and then put a sort of conservative spin on the headlines that he'd put. And they'd be pretty clever. And it got to be sort of the go-to place to see what was happening in the world. Arianna was smart. She started that with her friend Tim Lehrer, and no, not Ken Lehrer,
Ken.
and put that thing together, and with $35 million worth of venture capital, that's a pretty good startup fee. But rumor has it that, 85% of the visitors are there for the entertainment stuff and not for the politics.
Yeah, they're reading about the Grammy and watching slideshows of dresses and people falling. And
Yes,
that's
which is big on SEO.
Yeah, I think that's
Search engine
I
optimization.
think that's what's going on right now.
She also has changed her politics over the years, as you know, and I know, Bill. She started out as a conservative. She got famous for writing a book on Maria Callas and then one on Picasso, creator and destroyer. But then she became a sort of doyen of conservative politics. I remember when she and Al Franken did the Strange Bedfellows thing on
Oh, right,
Comedy
absolutely.
Central.
Yep. Well, she kind of for a while ran the Modern Salon, where she brought people together.
Yes.
And that was fun for a while, but I say I don't know, it's been maybe 8 months where it started to move much more toward that popular culture of movies, TV,
Well, she
movie
went
stars.
first through the metamorphosis where, after she married Michael Huffington, multimillionaire, he ran for Congress from California, spent a lot of his own money and failed. Then he decided that he was gay, and they divorced. I mean, she's had some real changes in her life. I mean,
she's a movie.
yes, and so now then she wakes up and realizes that she's not just a social liberal, she's also a fiscal liberal, and she thinks government should invest in people. So she goes through that metamorphosis. But what you've been hearing out of her lately is this third way. We're hearing a lot of third way stuff.
You know, it's going to be interesting when she partners up with Mr. Anderson at AOL, because I think he likes to run the show.
Tim Anderson, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of a free reign she's going to be allowed. Keith Olbermann thought that after he quit MSNBC the first time, his new deal would give him freedom, but we notice he's gone again.
I can't believe she'll have freedom. But again, that site has become relatively benign.
True.
So it's content.
But who knew that she was actually less about the politics and more about the successful businesswoman? I hadn't really pegged her that way.
Right. Well, the other thing that will happen is all the writers she currently has, will they move over? Because they're not paid. They're not paid anyway.
She has paid staff, and obviously they move with her. But the real challenge is that Ariana, she got by at first with celebrity bloggers, friends of hers from Hollywood. I mean, she was not a New York media person. She was a Hollywood, Los Angeles media person. And so Alec Baldwin would write for free, and it was a great thing because you could go there and celebrity blogs. Then she got a whole bunch of citizen bloggers who were willing to go out and do reporting for her. She worked closely with Jay Rosen from New York University on all sorts of citizen journalism initiatives. But now they're furious. They feel like they've donated all this content to AOL.
They created that site that she then sold for 300 and some million.
All their stuff is archived.
So what's going to happen the next time that happens? One of these sites comes up and people think, what am I getting out of this?
Well, the big deal, too, is that many of them are being urged to go elsewhere. A place called The Real Story is now trying to lure away those writers. Alternet.org is trying to lure away those citizen journalists. And the argument is pretty compelling. Raw Story is doing the same thing, saying, hey, wait a minute, why would you write for free for Ariana when all you're doing is supporting AOL?
Exactly. Major company.
Another interesting bit of this, Bill, is you and I have taken a look at Patch.com. Now that's sort of
that's owned by AOL.
That's what I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah, that's what we want to make clear.
And that's the alternative, really. Hers is the national news. And then Patch.com is the hyper-local. And now there's talk about how those will cross-synergize. How's that? Do you see that working?
No. No, I don't see it working at all, because the writers that typically are writing for Patch are very localized. I don't know, they have the same kind of scope you need for national recognition. That doesn't seem to work to me. It's kind of
they're thinking they're
frowning on top.
I heard her talking the other day about how that was part of the synergy she was looking for, was that she would have this stable of writers covering local news so people would go there. Then they would have a link to Huffington Post with some headlines that might attract them to go to Huffington Post.
You know, I suppose they could get local angles on national stories.
Well, maybe that's the case.
Maybe that's a good news technique.
There was a document leaked. It's called the AOL Way. And
Yeah, you sent that out.
we had taken a
Sort
look
of their
at it.
business plan.
Their business plan, which was basically turn writers into serfs and use the citizen journalism model as a way to drive down the cost of producing the content. So that's going to be a very corporate aggregation for
Yeah,
most
their,
of
their
this.
plan was to attract high-profile writers and pay them nothing.
Ah.
I mean, that's what it was. And a lot of people fell for that because it's easy to promote yourself that way. So
Right.
there was some short-term gain for some people who were on the edge but not successful quite yet.
Then maybe it leads to a staff job and maybe it doesn't. You never know.
It doesn't, I don't think.
Well, another new media story you were particularly interested in was the e-book, paper book.
Ooh. Yesterday's New York Times, which is actually online on Friday, their book section, which is almost the best read section in the Sunday New York Times.
I bet it is.
It profiles real high. Carried for the first time the e-book bestsellers. And what was interesting is they did an e-book alone, they did an e-book combined with paper sellers, both hardback and
One list
paper.
of both?
Yeah, well, they did three lists.
Oh, three lists.
Separate lists, in addition to all their other lists. What was interesting is the e-books and the hardback bestsellers combined with paperback bestsellers, the top 10 were about the same across the board. Now, what was dramatic about those lists is it showed 50% of the sales of, say, a book by James Patterson, which is number one on all lists. TikTok sells about 50% hardback, 50% ebook now.
What does paperback mean in this era? Does that
There's
mean
two kinds of paperback. There's the trade, and then there's the market style, which is the small one. But the trade paperback are the larger ones. Those
More
basically,
expensive.
yeah, basically means it's more expensive. $14.98 instead of $7.98.
Well, we saw the cycle where the book was more expensive in hardback and then the price dropped. Is the same thing going to happen on the Kindle and the iPad where you pay more for the bestseller at the beginning and then the price drops?
I think those things are yet to be answered. There's so many things, because this last year, so many things yet to be answered. Last year, ebooks was 10% of the market of bestsellers. It's 50% of the market now.
In 1 year?
Less than 1 year. How about 3 months?
Wow.
3 months. It went from 10% to 50%.
Is that the impact of the iPad?
It's the impact of iPad and the Kindle and Nook at Christmas. Those all came right, heavy sales at Christmas.
Is that part of how Borders shot itself in the foot by not having a reader?
That was one of the reasons Borders shot itself in the foot. I think you could come up with 25 more reasons. They had too many stores. And that was one of the real obvious ones. They went away from their mission. They stayed in music and other things a lot longer than Barnes & Noble did. I at one time thought Borders would outlast Barnes & Noble. I really thought it was a much better bookstore, and within 2 years it just fell from grace. But yeah, one of the real that was a real problem, was they didn't have an e-reader. Barnes & Noble has the Nook. Now, how long that's going to hold out for them, because they're basically a brick and mortar outfit. So
right.
They're selling now electronic books at a rate of 50% of the books that they're trying to sell in their stores.
I heard somebody say to me, I wish I could go into Schuler Books, for example, and hand them my Kindle and have them download the books onto it.
They're trying to do that basically, in some ways, with the Google ebooks.
Yeah.
But not quite. I know bookstore owners that have cut deals with customers that they pay them cash, and what they do is help them do exactly that, pick the books and download them.
Isn't that strange?
Well, they think it's strange too, but they take the cash anyway.
Yeah.
One interesting anomaly on the ebook list was John Grisham's book, his newest book, sold 3 to 1 on ebook.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So his audience is pretty tech savvy then.
They're tech savvy, and something else that a few people have talked about just since this came out yesterday is people may think his book is a throwaway. They'll read it on planes, they'll read it wherever, but they don't want to own it.
You know, that's true. A lot of detective fiction, I would have been happier if I had downloaded it and ditched it than if I had to figure out
It's not a
ways
book you're going
do
to
it.
keep in your house as a reference, probably, or something that you're going to learn.
I just think of them as insulation.
Yeah.
That may be the only answer
But
for
yeah,
both.
I think what was stunning about yesterday's list is all the booksellers knew it was coming since November, and USA Today has had one for some time, maybe since November. But to see it in print for the first time, it just gives reality to something they absolutely knew about. But fewer people really understood. So it's a big deal. I think that's probably the biggest thing to happen to the book industry in the last 5 years, 10 years, and then Amazon before that.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Lansing Online News Radio. Bill, you had one closing comment on a new book coming out that is
Thank you for reminding me. And the reason I want to mention it, it's Angel Fire. It's by a 24-year-old Mason, Michigan woman. She's a graduate of Mason High School.
Wow.
This is her debut book. It is published by HarperCollins. She has a contract for a trilogy. It is a paranormal book. It's for young adults. So maybe 14 and older, she told me, but she's going to be at Schuler's on the 19th of February at 2 p.m. Extremely mature person, especially talking about her book and writing.
How old is she?
24.
Wow.
She's got quite a career. And when I read this kind of book, you can tell it's for young adults. And it's skewing toward young adult women, obviously. That's who reads typically paranormal books. But I read it, and I'm thinking, this woman's got a career as a science fiction writer. I don't see that big a difference, frankly. It's just the way that they've sort of branded these books to sell them. This is young adult science fiction.
Interesting.
It's got a mythology, a whole world that exists outside our real world. But it's kind of interesting. I mean, that's like winning the lottery for a 24-year-old to get published.
Well, I want you to know I have a whole alternative universe, and in mine, none of my computers work. Unfortunately, that is my reality. I've been spending the last 24 hours trying to figure out how networks were down. And
somebody said that actually James Patterson runs the universe off his laptop.
I see. Well, we better get in touch with him and make sure that because he's leaving me off the list. Well, we are glad to see that our first guest has arrived. Greetings to Sandra Seaton, and it's so good to see you
Thanks
here
so
this
much.
evening. Tell us first a little bit, Sandra. Now, you are at the MSU College of Law these days, is that right?
That's correct.
How does that work for a playwright to have a position at a law school? How does that work?
Well, I'm the writer in residence at the MSU College of Law, and I think Dean Joan Howarth's idea was to expand the notion of law schools to go beyond just the idea of some kind of quasi-trade school experience where you learn all the logistics and all the legal aspects, and to bring in the humanities and show that the law involves not just the legal,
The letter of the law.
but our arts and letters.
Yeah. Is this common? I've not heard of a law
No.
school doing this.
Actually, this is the first.
I think it's the first. I looked
It's
too, and
the
I could
first.
not find anywhere else. It's
That's
an
amazing. What a
amazing.
wonderful concept.
This is the first law school to have a writer in residence.
Well, it's great, and it's great that you're here. How long does the residency last? Is it a...
Well, it's initially it's for this year, but it could be ongoing.
Wonderful. What
Yeah.
kinds of things do you do in that capacity?
Well, this last year, November, I did a new play, and I think what attracted the College of Law to my work is my plays. It's the legal aspect
Ah.
that my plays have. So my play that the College of Law sponsored this past November at MSU's Arena Theater, it's called Music History. It's a play about African American college students in the 60s, 1963 to be specific, during the civil rights movement, civil rights era. And the lead character is in SNCC, and it's about he's going down south to register people to vote. So right away you get into that legal world of the legal, and of course but it's about not about icons, but about them as individuals. So it's humanizing the whole thing, which is I think also what they wanted to get at. So I've been doing things like that. Last night I did a stage reading of a play of mine at the University of Michigan at their residential college, a play about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson.
We thought that was a perfect topic to talk about for Valentine's
For
Day.
Valentine's Day. I mean, because they certainly had a love affair, and an unusual love affair, especially, in the context of the era. Tell us a little bit about
Is
the
that a love
relation-
affair?
Well, it's not in the Romeo and Juliet sense, not in the sense that, it's us against the world, or love is all that matters, because, in my play, I show that they have feelings for each other. Well, first of all, my interest in their relationship, I had to really decide, are these two people that I can bring in this whole area of affection with. They were together, and this has been documented for 38 years. They had 5 children, and of course we know about the DNA. And during that time, during the 38 years, there's no sign that he was with any other woman. So there has to be something really strong there in the relationship. But I don't know whether, in our modern sense, you could call it
That's true.
love, because women, of course, were property then. Slaves, enslaved people, were property. And she had a special status there. She was his wife's half-sister, and the whole Hemings family had, they weren't treated.
For those of you who don't know the story of Sally Hemings, we're talking about Thomas Jefferson and his relationship with Sally Hemings, who was his slave. And at the same time, they also had a personal relationship to the
Mhm.
point that not only did it last decades, she traveled with him when he went to Paris. So there were They clearly had a special relationship, but you're right, romantic love has changed in the way we look at it over the years, and maybe marriage was something, and those kinds of relationships that involve children were viewed somewhat differently.
Well, one of the things that happened in that era,
Mhm.
up through the early 20th century, was people died young.
Right.
I mean, so a woman could die in childbirth.
Right.
That was very likely
That
to
was where
happen.
they mostly
So
died.
there were a lot of marriages or relationships were marriages of convenience to some extent too.
Well, she was 15 years old when she first, I think, when the relationship began. And people say, oh my goodness, 15.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about today. But then, a woman at 15, that's the age that you, at that time in the 1700s, 1789, that you would have started a relationship.
Well, Romeo and Juliet was probably 15 or
Mhm,
16 in the
mhm,
play.
mhm, mhm.
Young women matured
Mhm.
and accepted family responsibilities much
Right.
younger than they do now.
Right.
It wasn't unusual for people to die before they reached 40.
Mhm.
And as my Facebook
Yeah.
page attests, some of us started young anyhow, so. But in that era, I mean, now by our modern standards, we would have said, well, a 15-year-old, he was a predator.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
I keep wondering, I'm not so sure how much things have changed. Was he looked askance upon in his era?
Oh my goodness, yes. There was a huge scandal about it. This journalist, James Callender, published a broadside. He was ridiculed by the Federalists. John Adams said this is the result of, this is what happens, this whole abomination, slavery, produces this sort of thing. So he was ridiculed, but he never denied the relationship. And this came out in 1801, and he was right in the first term of his presidency. So he really could have chosen to, to get it, to have her sent off. He didn't do any of that, and he went on to have about 3 more children because the DNA is on the 5th child.
Oh.
So.
What about that issue of consent? We're talking about a 15-year-old girl. Can she give consent? We're talking about a slave who is treated as property. Can she give consent? Is consent a modern construct? Was that as much of a part of the issue back then, or was it the race mixing?
Well, I think, look, she's a 15-year-old girl from Virginia. She goes to France, travels there with Jefferson's daughter Maria, and she's, my goodness, here's a 15-year-old in Paris. She's there with Thomas Jefferson, the ambassador. He's this bastion of power. She's got to look up to him. I was thinking about Bogey and Bacall.
Ah.
Here's a guy who's, he snaps his fingers and people go, yes, Mr. Jefferson, no, Mr. Jefferson. So I'm sure she was quite impressed. What else did she know? She could have stayed in France. She would have been free there.
Really?
Yes, because there was, immediately on French territory, she was free. She chose to go back to Monticello with Jefferson, and the story goes, and this is in her son Madison's memoirs, the story goes that she and Jefferson, that there was a bargain between the two of them, that all the children that they had together, if she returned, would be free at age 21, which they were.
Ah.
They were. And that she would have extraordinary privileges. That was a quote from her son, Madison. And not only that, she would be, one above the others. She never worked in the fields. She did things about the house. So she did have a position. And, what other kind of life? She might have had enough of a practical sense about her to know what other kind of life would there have been for her.
Right.
She could have been somebody's mistress in Paris. She was very beautiful. Or she could have gone back and been a slave in the States.
It's about choices people make.
Yeah.
Pragmatic choices, too, in context of an era.
It wasn't like Sex in the City, where she could go off and get some Jimmy Choos and,
Right.
and go tiptoeing off to Manhattan.
Get a job in PR somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. When you try to get your head into a character so that you can recreate in terms of dialogue, express that person, how do you do that kind of research? And how do you then, when you get these written materials that you may find, how do you try to put yourself into that character so you can understand her at a deep level?
Well, you do as much research as you can. I read quite a bit about Sally Hemings and about Thomas Jefferson. There was not as much to read about Sally Hemings, but I read, and things about the era, as much firsthand as I could. And then you have to set all that aside because it becomes baggage. And then you live in that world. You imagine, it's not you there, but you're kind of a fly on the wall.
Project yourself in?
Yeah.
Sandra, I know a lot of writers do this.
Mhm.
Do you see the scenes of the two of them talking? Almost like a television or a movie program?
So you're transcribing the movie rather than
Do you do that? I
creating the
mean, I
dialogue?
know many do and many don't, but I mean, do you actually visually see them in your head, them
Well-
talking and?
Well, the way I think about it is as if I'm in a time machine, and then I step out of that, and I'm in that world. That's why it helps to do this when, early in the morning or when you don't have the phone on. I don't know that I know that, I've spent a lot of years writing dialogue, and maybe when I first started to write dialogue, that might have been the case, but I think it's just something that I write to get it right. And when I hear a false note, then it's wrong and I have to keep working on it, it's...
Because you're especially doing something difficult, writing in an era.
Oh, yeah.
It was probably easier for you to write in the 60s, possibly, than
Oh, yeah.
it would have been the
Oh, yeah.
1700s.
Oh, yeah.
Because, wow, and you got to know a lot.
Well, you don't want it to be stilted, or you don't want them to come off sounding, posturing or sounding like icons. So it's a combination of some aspects of everyday speech, probably more 1800s than 1700s, because that would, although sometimes I mix in Jefferson's quotations into the dialogue, but
Would that work? Do you actually go back and include 17th century speech, or would that fall oddly on a modern ear, and do you have to find some sort of happy balance there to try to give the indication that the people are speaking in the language of that time?
well, I do have some little phrases from Jefferson.
Oh.
Actually, whole sentences. He has something about a woman who reads poems loses her sense of everyday reality. It's something like that, but I just stuck that in because he thought women should not read poetry. So he was not the most romantic guy in the world.
But he was well read. He had a library that didn't quit.
Right. He thought if they read poetry, maybe they wouldn't want to do chores or things like that, which is probably might be
Do
right.
we have any knowledge of how Mrs. Jefferson felt about all this?
Now, you mean his first wife?
Mm-hmm.
She died in childbirth. She died when Sally Hemings was 9 years old. And
it didn't
supposedly,
overlap, and I see.
supposedly they were all, the whole Hemings family and the Jeffersons, they were all around her bed at that time.
Interesting.
And at that time, supposedly, she asked him to pledge to never marry again. So she thought, I guess, romantically.
This is an amazing story for Valentine's Day. We'll have to remember this again next year.
This is more complicated. I love a complicated Valentine's
what
Day
an
story.
amazing
Love is not as
story.
easy as we often think it is. Is that a theme in many of your other plays as well, those kinds of complicated personal relationships?
I'm interested in stories that go against the norm, that show or reveal aspects of history that, just the unexpected there. Historically plausible,
Ah,
but not the expected sort of thing.
well, I heard you mention the SNCC, the Southern
Right, a student
Student
Nonviolent
Nonviolent
Coordinating
Coordinating
Committee.
Committee. I remember the famous quote from Stokely Carmichael, who
Yeah.
was the head of that one, asked by women, what is the position of women in the movement, and he said
Oh.
horizontal.
Yes, that's right.
He
That's
launched the
right.
women's movement overnight.
There,
with
there you
that.
go. There you go. Yeah, that was not one of his best moments.
No, that was not a good Valentine's Day quote. I would
No.
suggest that you don't pick that one up
Wouldn't
for
have
Valentine's
been, wouldn't
Day.
played well on Facebook now, would it? Or-
No, it wouldn't be a nice card where you would open it up. So, what are your plans now at MSU? What is coming up on your schedule?
Oh, jeez.
Or what other things are you working on that we should know about, whether they're going to surface at MSU or not?
Well, I wrote I had to think for a minute. I wrote a piece about Martin Luther King Jr., a spoken word piece, and it's called King. And I am working on doing that with George Shirley, who was a tenor at the Met for 11 seasons. So what he's going to do is he will say the spoken words and do the text, and he will sing spirituals a cappella.
Mm.
And that's
Beautiful.
So that's going to happen sometime at the latter half of March. We're working on that together. I'm going to be doing a version of that on February 27th over at the First Presbyterian Church in downtown Lansing.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
That's a Sunday at 11:30. And I know that there's, trying to think about other things coming up. I have a play called The Will about African American life, and it's about an actual legal will, about African Americans during Reconstruction, that is going to tour Michigan this coming October. Working on that too.
Oh, you're very busy.
I was going to say you're prolific.
Well, we try.
And one of the things I know about Sandra is, and we've talked about, is the life of a playwright is you do have to do everything.
Everything.
Almost have to go find the chairs and bring them and set them up.
Ah.
It's still that way. It's hard.
You have to find people to perform your work or it doesn't live.
Yeah. Last night I was in Ann Arbor, and I was trying to find Pizza House. One of my job was to buy the meals for 6 actors, a director, and myself. So I was hauling those back.
It's a real highfalutin life. Isn't it?
Right. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Right.
Playwright and pizza getter.
Right, and everybody nobody wanted pizza, but everybody wanted something, had something different, and for some reason they did not include the fish and chips. And the lead, the one who was doing Sally Hemings, did not have her fish and chips, so that was.
Sandra, what gave you the confidence to become playwright? Many of us, I grew up wanting to be a writer, but I never thought of playwright. I always thought of that in my era as something that men did, and women didn't have a chance to do that. That was somehow separate from us. What gave you, how did you get your break? How did you get your start? What made you have the confidence to do that?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think in my family, because they were connected with show business. Back at that time, women did not. It was not considered appropriate for women to be in show business. But a relative of mine, Flournoy Miller, wrote the book for Shuffle Along back in 1921, which was the musical that inaugurated. They say it inaugurated the Harlem Renaissance, but it was the switchover to what we know now as the Broadway musical from Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh, from the operetta.
From the operetta. And one of the songs from Shuffle Along was I'm Just Wild About Harry. And it was U.B. Blake and Noble Sissel did the music. So I grew up, my grandmother was very close to Flournoy Miller, and I grew up hearing those songs around the house. She would do little skits. And my mother also wrote little skits. And I think the people in my family always did these sorts of things. And then I think in college I took this course in creative writing, and I wrote in high school for the school paper. So I ended up majoring in college in creative writing. And I don't know, just...
What gave you that first break?
Yeah.
What was your first play that was ever produced?
That would have been the Theater Award Prize it was connected with Columbia College in Chicago, and it was a play called The Bridge Party, which was my first play, which was done here at MSU in 2000. But it was that Theater Award Prize that got me to thinking, yeah, it's great. And that was in '89.
Wow.
That was a good question, because I had never thought of it before, because playwriting was, for the longest time, a male-dominated profession. You never...
Still is, I think.
Still is, I think.
It still is.
Huh.
It still is I'd say a male-dominated profession. And, if you write plays, you're always proving yourself. And you never know what the next performance is going to be like. And you can take the same play and you can have 2 or 3 really great performances, and then the fourth one is like, oh my goodness.
Well, a lot of it is what the actors and actresses do too, and the director.
Yeah.
So it has to be frustrating. It's like turning a book over to a scriptwriter.
Mm-hmm.
You don't
Oh.
even recognize your book anymore. It's like, what was that?
It can be terrifying, though. I mean, the things that can go wrong on stage, and sometimes the magic happens and everything goes right. But your work is then in the hands of other people to interpret through their own personalities,
sometimes
body
high
language,
school.
everything else. Well, yeah.
And there's some good money there.
Oh, that's what I've heard. Yeah, because you sell the rights.
Mhm.
Ah,
Mhm.
interesting. Is that making a difference in the online era? Are people able to have more of their work seen because they can put it online through video now in a way that they couldn't before?
I haven't done that. I don't know too much about online. I know one of my plays is already a Google book. It's in an anthology, and I didn't even know. Nobody asked me.
Well, Google's like that.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and Google tends to do that. They appropriate things more. Getting paid is part of the process, and making a living from doing that is not always that easy.
It really isn't, because people don't seem to think that writers need to get paid and that you're doing it just for the satisfaction. And we all love to be satisfied, but it's nice to get paid.
It's a wonderful thought. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh,
It's
it's
been a
my
wonderful
pleasure.
Valentine's Day
Absolutely.
gift.
We're going to do
I hope you'll
next
come back.
Valentine's Day for sure, because it's kind of a great topic. We should see if
It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
It's my pleasure. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed this, and I think the two of you both being writers, I thought that was
Well, this is fun, and it's going to be archived on Ustream
really.
on the web, so you will have a web presence with this. Pretty.
Oh my
Yes,
goodness!
yeah.
I'll let you know what the address and how to get at it and things.
All right.
For those of you who are
Yeah.
listening, you can go to www.lansingonlinenews.com, and you will find a link there to the live web stream, so you can watch Bill and Sandra and pick up the archive once the show is over.
That was great. Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Now
Happy
we're
Valentine's Day.
now we're going to have another writer,
Yes,
a poet,
we're in a
singer.
groove.
Look at here, we're in a
Wow.
and you
He
did
dressed
you
for
hear-
the occasion.
Did you hear the quote of what Thomas Jefferson said about poetry?
No.
Oh,
You
good.
said-
I'm glad you didn't hear that. He wasn't too fond of poetry, especially
At least for women.
for women.
I caught the tail end of that.
Uh-huh.
Have a seat, Sam.
Sam Mills is joining us. He is one of our favorite poets, and he often does poetry readings down in various places in Old Town. What are some of the locations these days, Sam, where people might be able to hear some of your poetry? Is anything coming up in the near future?
Next month, March 16th, I believe, the second Wednesday, at the Creole. Doors open at 7, I think. There's an open mic, but there's also a theme to it. It's a happy birthday, Lawrence Ferlinghetti.
Yes. Who is
Really?
like 93, maybe?
Late late 80s at least.
Oh, he's older than 80.
Um,
He's over 90.
Who
okay.
gets to read Coney Island of the Mind?
I don't know whoever gets
Oh,
up first, but
great poem, too.
I'll elbow you out of the way.
Relaine Stokes has been running that for many years, and
Ah.
there's going to be she'll have a big birthday card for everyone to sign and send that off to Lawrence in San Francisco.
See, there's a site online that's called Dead or Not Dead, and he's one of those people that I'm never too sure about, so I check every once in a while.
Yeah.
He's definitely alive, but
he's still
he
kicking.
was awarded a national prize last year at Book Expo America. He couldn't make the trip. He sent someone in his place, so he's pretty frail.
30 years ago, when I made my first trek to San Francisco, I did have to make a pilgrimage to City Lights bookstore, and I must admit that I was surprised at how tiny it was.
It's tight in there.
It is, yes, you can barely turn around.
It's chock-a-block, floor to ceiling.
But he was always one of my heroes, and certainly that was the place that gave a start to people like Allen Ginsberg with Howl. And
Yeah, his
I was
old,
fortunate in that era too to see Ginsberg read Howl in Ann Arbor many years ago and get to chant Om with him for a while.
Was that the last time he was in Ann Arbor? Just not too long before he died?
No, this was back in the anti-war days.
Okay. He made a trip to Ann Arbor. It would have been in early 90s, I think. Just a year or so before he died. And he read at Rackham Auditorium.
Have
He-
you
he
seen
read
the
Howl.
movie?
I haven't seen it.
It
yet,
hasn't
no.
played here yet, I don't believe, has it?
I think it
I don't
might
think
be
it yet
out
went
No,
on,
the
Many
movie we're
things-
talking about is Ginsberg.
Many things never come here.
Come here, I know. You have, or if they do, you could miss them overnight. Because they're gone.
Yeah.
One showing. Yeah.
That's it, they are.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's too
we
bad.
are a small town in some respects.
But that's why I love the DVD.
Yeah,
And then you also get the story behind the story and then other second discs.
yeah.
So you
The
can-
director's cut.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So that
So
would be
coming up
fun.
is Ferlinghetti's birthday party down at the
Wednesday,
Creole
March
Valley.
16th at Creole in Old Town.
We'll put information up on Lansing
Yeah.
on my
Okay.
news.
I'm going to be going out with my spouse to San Francisco, and obviously that was like number one on the list. was to go
Yeah,
there.
Absolutely.
It's just a great place.
The people I was out there with thought I was crazy, but seemed sensible to me. It depends on where your priorities are.
I have a T-shirt from City Lights.
Ah.
A friend sent me.
Well worth the trip.
So today is Valentine's Day, and
Indeed.
you and Rue Lane periodically do these Hot Time in the Old Town Tonight kind of poetry readings.
We the 19th annual Burning Desires was yesterday.
Oh, I missed it.
It got some promotion, not a whole lot. I didn't do any of the organizing this year. 19 years, I wanted to like hang back a little bit.
Kick back,
So
yeah.
in past years, I've gather the poets. This is most invitation only. Got the PR together, got that out. It's made the poster myself.
Sounds a lot like a playwright's job.
Yes, it does.
And
Poets and playwrights are in the
there were
same category.
6 people working on this one this year, and
And the word didn't spread as far.
well, it got out. We had like nearly 40 people there.
Oh,
Not as
that's
big
good.
as some years, but it was an excellent crowd.
I didn't get it on Facebook. That's where I live these
I
days
didn't
to
either.
find these things.
There was a Facebook page put up last week.
Ah,
That's right.
Well,
And you know what? I am relying probably too much on Facebook.
That's true.
yeah, but it could be real easy to put events up there and then assume that everyone's going to see it.
Sam, have you brought us something to read? Because otherwise you're
Indeed.
going to be left with my favorite Valentine's Day spring poem is "Spring is here, the grass is riz, I wonder where the flowers
flowers
is."
is.
Yes, that's about all I can handle and commit to memory these days.
Well, I brought a few.
Good.
I brought a few of my own and a few but from some other people since.
Oh, you know, one of the things too, Sam, and I know you were out at an event for the MSU Poetry Center. They're
last
starting
month.
to become a dominant force in poetry in the community, which is kind of nice. In fact, Irene McKinney's there tonight, where I would be there tonight seeing her. She's the poet laureate of North Carolina, but they're starting to bring people into the community we've never seen.
Yes.
And I think that
it's-
bodes well for the future. They're going to land some big time folks.
It's been a long time since MSU has had regular visits by some major poets and writers. It was happening on campus back when back in my callow youth in the mid-'70s when I first got here. But it did drop off for a long time. Now the Poetry Resource Center is doing really good work.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 on Valentine's Day here in Lansing, Michigan, and Sam is going to gift us with a couple of poems here. What's suitable for the occasion, Sam?
Well, something about love.
I would hope.
And I'll read this one, which I wrote this back in 2005. It's called Crystal Radio. Does it matter that learned researchers have discovered a direct link between connective tissue fibers on the epidermis and the limbic region of the brain? Possibly. Is it of any interest to the general population that even the slightest stroking of the skin is noticed and transmitted by those fibers? Maybe. Would it be considered important to anyone that a magnetic resonance imaging scan of the limbic region, the seat of emotion, lights up with activity when the skin is being gently caressed? Perhaps. Do these phenomena explain what happens when we touch? Not in full. It only proves the obvious connection between touch and desire, caress, and response. It seems only a basic explanation from an apprentice electrician charting the hard wiring that's been there for millennia. Instead, look at it this way. There's a little orchestra in the smoky, dark dance hall of the brain that plays a tango each time a caress is transmitted over the wiring. I was never waiting for the scientists to explain this to me. I was never waiting for a description of how the circuitry worked. I was never waiting for verification that the circuit was open, ready for your touch. I've never needed an MRI scan to tell me that your touch transmits the language of a slow dance, lights up a small spot on the dance floor, turns my skin into a crystal radio that you spark and fine-tune. Does this matter? Most definitely.
Ah, yes. Yes. Oh, wonderful. Oh, I like that.
So that,
And some of us know what a crystal radio is.
yes, that came from reading a newspaper about the connection between skin tissue and the limbic.
Touch and the limbic brain.
Yeah, and so there's got to be a poem there somewhere. And
Yeah.
sort of
Well, are you old enough to remember crystal radios?
Indeed. Yeah, I
I
had
had
one.
one.
Yeah.
Did you?
Oh yeah, we
I
made
made
it.
one
Well,
with
we
my
made it because
grandfather out
I
of
was a
an
Cub
old
Scout.
Quaker Oats
Yep.
box, and you wrapped the bell wire around it and varnished it, and then you had the little crystal with
Which
the
was,
cat's
when
whisker.
you think about it, it's pretty interesting that it works.
Yeah.
Is it a quartz crystal?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. And you had this little needle that you would just sort of
They call
move
it
over the
cat's
surface.
whiskers.
Cat's
Yeah.
whisker, yeah.
You'd sort of move over the surface to tune it.
Right, so you find your station by running this thing around that crystal, and it seemed like you could never find the same place
It
twice.
was a real piece of magic. It was a Mr. Wizard kind of effect.
It was.
Yeah.
But that evokes a wonderful image and a very evocative image for people of our generation. Do you get questions from younger listeners saying, what the heck's a crystal radio?
Not yet.
Oh.
Not yet, but I think I've noticed some sort of quizzical looks from some.
You mean like somebody in their 40s or
Little
something like
children.
that? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
What's a crystal
It's a
radio?
radio.
This is a good day to ponder what love means and the connection between love and desire, isn't it?
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
saw a young man walking down the street in East Lansing from B&A Floral with his
Oh.
bouquet of
Roses.
flowers in his arms and the clear plastic walking down the street, and I thought, yes, indeed, he's a smart young man to remember the day. It was a little late in the day, it was about 5 o'clock, but
Right.
at least he was going to be handing over the bouquet. Uh-huh.
As long as you get it during that 24 hours.
Hmm. Have you given poems in your to women on Valentine's Day? Have you written a special poem?
Yeah.
Have
What
you?
were they and who were they to? No.
Really, you're going to get people in trouble.
Yeah.
Next question.
Next question. It's a good question. What's the next one?
But I do have some other poems related to Valentine's.
Yes, yes.
But a lot of them. Some are a little bit more risque than others. I told you I wouldn't be bringing the dirty stuff.
Yeah, that's
But
It's family
The
family
flat-out
radio.
porno.
this is family radio, so.
But then some
but,
families
yeah,
are stranger than others.
It comes. We do get pretty close during Burning Desires each year.
I'll bet you do. Skid right up to the line and across.
Yep, but the Vice Squad has yet to shut us down. So, what else? I'll read another one of mine. Then maybe someone else's.
Yours always make me think and laugh both, and I enjoy that.
They're sophisticated urban poems
They
to
are,
me.
they
That's what I think. I mean, it's
Okay.
just kind of a whole different approach to poetry I love.
Well, speaking of sophisticated urban love poetry, I'll write this one. It's entitled Paris, but it takes place in Detroit.
Oh, the Paris of North
Paris-
America.
The Paris
I've heard that.
The Paris-Detroit connection.
Yeah.
We were making out like 20-somethings in a Detroit parking lot, tongues coiling and uncoiling together, hands revealing new territory, when somebody in a car honked and hollered. As I grabbed her ass and pulled her closer, I thought, they wouldn't do this to us in Paris. But then I heard her breath hot in my ear like a message from a country I'd nearly forgotten, and I forgave my countrymen. I'd forgive and forget my state, my country, even my name, given enough time like that night. Her touch was the unspoken romance language, heated and lilting, precise and luxurious. One kiss, one touch, one caress, and I was on the Eiffel Tower with her. Everywhere I looked, it was Paris.
Wonderful. That's so
Can we
good.
steal that? That's a great poem.
Every April, Bill organizes the Poem a Day for the National Poetry Month.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that would be a
I think we need to
wonderful-
post that one this year if you'll let us.
Certainly.
That is a great
And
poem.
we need to figure out a video that goes with.
Ah,
Wouldn't that be?
That might be pretty, Karen, our engineer, the other
She's
one, is
nodding.
going, oh, good luck. And we'll be asking her to shoot that for us.
So you'd have to fly to Paris
Well, that's not bad.
or Vegas. 'cause
And
I
you
hear they
certainly don't
got-
want, you don't want it featuring people our age, you want them Karen's
Wow.
age. That's where,
That is a terrific poem.
that is
I-
fantastic.
Remind me of, I'll send you a copy.
Yeah, we will. It's perfect for Detroit to.
It is perfect. I mean, Detroit's romance was indeed backseat of the car romance. That was, I mean, you talk about the Motor City, that's what it was all about.
Yeah, you're definitely.
That's what liberated teenagers from the confines of trying to find opportunities to be alone. The Great American Automobile certainly led to all of our population explosion,
For
didn't
a
it?
certain period of time, it did.
Wow, yeah. I don't know if that's still the case.
Oh, I would imagine it is. Of course, I haven't done any research on this.
At least firsthand. Yeah.
But certainly when I was growing up, I grew up in Utica, north of Detroit, on a 24-mile road, not too far from Stony Creek Metropolitan Park. It's about a mile and a half away, and it's about where the glaciers ended. It was a glacier that came down and lifted all these hills and a couple of lakes around there.
We were talking about the Eskers before.
And you could, as you came into the park, you sort of drove up this little hill, and suddenly you could see a good portion of metropolitan Detroit. And on a clear day, you could see downtown from there.
Oh,
But
wow.
that was the best place to park.
Yes.
You could park there. Oh yeah, we're going to go, look at the lights of Detroit.
Everyone had
30
those kind
miles
of
away.
places.
Yeah.
Ours was along Saginaw Bay. It's now
Yeah, watching the sunrise.
unfortunately now it's like a bird viewing site, so it just doesn't have the same,
No.
same kind of thing for going for
I
it.
would imagine though that probably making it on the backseat of the car is a little bit less now.
Well, there used to be drive-ins too.
There are
so.
alternatives that we didn't have,
Yes.
and there's more affluence.
I would think so.
So one
Some
can
degree.
actually get
Yeah.
rooms in places and things like that. That
Yeah.
the luxury that, I mean, I still have, I think, marks on my body from various gear shift knobs.
Well, especially when
I may still, there may be one located in there I have not even.
two-seater cars came out, the front two-seaters.
Yes.
Mm-hmm, with
They
a
were
gear
exciting.
shift. Yeah, that really was a big breakthrough for,
Big breakthrough.
for love nesting.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But the demise of the bench seat
exactly.
terrible.
to bucket seats, which is
Bucket seats and seat belts. Good
yeah,
Lord.
it's like
Bondage of a sort.
yeah, how can you make out? You're in one bucket seat and they're in another bucket seat.
Yeah.
See, I really missed the passing of drive-in theaters, because that was another place
Yeah.
that you went, which is, when you think of it, was unimaginable, because there was like 1,000 other people there with you. It was like,
But it's nice and dark and
It's
they're
a
all
mo-
watching the movie.
movie,
Or they're all
sort of-
making out.
Yeah,
One
it
of the
They're all-
two.
was sort of an unusual thing to do.
There was the Crest Drive-In out in Okemos,
Mhm.
but there was also the Duran Dirties. I mean,
The Crest became an extra.
Now the Duran Dirties.
yeah, the Duran Dirties. They showed actual porno films.
Which you could actually see on the expressway driving by.
And there are times I have never seen anybody that was like a 12-foot tall male member as I'm driving by on the highway going, what the heck
What
was
the-
that I just went?
There was a lot of complaints about that.
I'll bet there were. A
Or
lot of cars swerving off
I-69.
the road.
Yeah.
You know,
It went on for a few years,
Oh,
too.
yeah. Longer than it probably is necessary.
So in this vein of romance, which I
Mm.
think has now degenerated into outright lust, which is what we're remembering, were there anything more? What is the next poem to sort of tickle our various
Well,
fancies?
I was thinking of reading somebody else's poem. I could read one by Billy Collins.
Former poet laureate of the United
Laureate,
States.
entitled "Taking Off Emily Dickinson's Clothes."
Oh, yes,
Oh.
do.
You know.
Yeah,
First, her tippet made of tulle, easily lifted off her shoulders and laid on the back of a wooden chair. And her bonnet, the bow undone with a light forward pull. Then the long white dress, a more complicated matter with mother-of-pearl buttons down the back, so tiny and numerous that it takes forever before my hands can part the fabric like a swimmer's dividing water and slip inside. You will want to know that she was standing by an open window in an upstairs bedroom, motionless, a little wide-eyed, looking out at the orchard below, the white dress puddled at her feet on the wide-board hardwood floor. The complexity of women's undergarments in 19th century America is not to be waved off, and I proceeded like a polar explorer through clips, clasps, and moorings, catches, straps, and whalebone stays, sailing toward the iceberg of her nakedness. Later, I wrote in a notebook, it was like riding a swan into the night. But of course, I can't tell you everything, like the way she closed her eyes to the orchard, or how her hair tumbled free of its pins, how there were sudden dashes whenever we spoke. What I can tell you is it was terribly quiet in Amherst that Sabbath afternoon, nothing but a carriage passing the house, a fly buzzing in a window pane. So I could plainly hear her inhale when I undid the very top hook and eye fastener of her corset, and I could hear her sigh when finally it was unloosed, the way some readers sigh when they realize that hope has feathers, that reason is a plank, that life is a loaded gun that looks right at you with a yellow eye.
Oh,
Yeah, Billy Collins is a terrific
Oh,
poet.
that-
And so you worked
what a
out
great
some major
conceit to just
images.
think of that, to think of undressing Emily Dickinson, about whom. So maybe
Kind
one of
of,
those
it's kind of a
fascinating women.
historical love show tonight, too. We've had Thomas Jefferson, Sally Hemings, and Emily Dickinson,
Dickinson, yes.
which takes a lot of imagination.
And then for the really old, the back seat of the car. So that sort of brings us up to modern times.
Yeah, I'll find something a little bit more modern here.
Yeah, that should close us out then. I liked Emily Dickinson, too, though.
I do too.
She's a pretty interesting lady.
We all speculated on her romantic life, on her inner life. How did she travel so little and have such a circumscribed life, but yet live so much?
Yeah, how did she do that?
How did she do that?
In secret. Yeah.
In secret, yeah.
Well, I'll read one more of mine, which again it seems like it's written somewhat in the near past. It's called "The Fig Tree in Greece," and it starts off with an epigram that came from an article about a poet who was working with Alzheimer's patients and getting them to remember certain aspects that they could write poems about. And he was talking about one line that one patient came up with: "In Greece, I picked figs from a tree. My lover watched me with joy." And I thought, okay, I can do something with that. And I expand on that. The fig tree in Greece. That summer I turned as brown as one of Hera's earthly sons, young, strong, a wrestler of bulls, and fully unaware of the fate planned for me. It did not matter. My lover from the village carried fresh casserai, bread, retsina, and a small pot of sardines down the hill to the orchard each day for the week I labored there. We tried to teach each other what the other should say in the sun, but what we offered in the shade was language enough. That last day, she watched me in the fig tree, and at one point I looked back at her from a high branch. In a week, I'd be on a steamer to Cairo, and within the year she would forget me. At least, that's what I told myself at the time. But right then, even the gods could not have kept me from climbing down that tree with a basket of figs that I gave her.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. You've imagined yourself in a lot of different worlds there.
Yeah, that's part of the fun.
It's part of the fun of writing
some
poetry
things.
for you?
Yeah, and writing about people much different than
Uh-huh.
or taking that one little piece of memory or image and expanding on it.
Poetry is often a game for the young, it seems, and many young people outgrow it and say, well, their feelings aren't as vivid. But you continue to write.
I keep trying. The output is not probably, my output is probably not as much as it was when I was a youth, but I keep trying to crank it out here and there.
Just wonderful. Thank you so much. Perfect Valentine's Day.
Well, thank you for
What?
inviting me. It's always a pleasure being here.
Bill, we're going to be hearing later on this week from Governor Rick Snyder's budget, and we hope to be discussing that on the
And there will not be any Valentines there or any poetry, I'm sure.
No, I
Did
don't.
you hear his lieutenant governor called it an atomic bomb? That might have been a misstep.
Not a good sign.
Yeah.
You were telling me the Civil Services Commission is already questioning some of his practices, so we will talk about that next week. Thank you very much for listening to Lansing Online News Radio tonight, and join us next week here at WLNZ 89.7 in Lansing.
Mary Jean. Cool, great poetry. Oh, we got to do Paris though.
Yeah,
We should find some way to do a little. I know someone
I want to
that's
do
got
a sound
a
slide.
that has a
still images.
collection of maybe 50 Eiffel Towers.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if we could do something in miniature with the Eiffel Towers. And he's got, those all kinds of brass and weird ones. Detroit was at one time called the Paris of North America because of the wide boulevards and
Lots of trees, lots of
lots
churches.
of churches. Yeah,
Mm.
it's not called that anymore.
Not anymore.
It's called the Lebanon of the invasion.
Was it Voltaire who said that rich and poor can live alike? Poor man, rich man has just as much right to live under the bridge as the poor man does. When he met Paris, that's kind of what Detroit is now. So what's new these days, Sam? Now you're telling me that they're going to need some additional assistance for Anita.
Yeah, if I can get Anita to pay for it. She had a fall in early December. She's pretty much in a lift chair now.
Is she?
That was interesting.
Can make it to the bathroom with a wheeled walker, but she's just been living on the first floor. She can't do this. She hasn't been upstairs for 2 years.
Well, that's
So
Anita has really severe rheumatoid arthritis.
and they figured out that's what she had when she was like 16, and she's been progressing since then. So for 60 days we had visiting nurses and a home health aide to bathe her, but that ran out once you're after 60 days, and she doesn't have any tubes coming out of her. There's no open wounds or anything. So talking to LAP Respite Center, for 20 years, and they provide home care, private home care for parents of children who are disabled. For adults, we're taking care of adults. But it's private. It's $19 an hour, and through almost no insurance will cover that.
Yeah.
And she's hesitant about paying for it. So I've been taking care of her for almost 3 years now. And I have to go back and do some. She's not feeling well today, nauseous. So.
Mm. That makes it so difficult for you to do anything else.
I gave up some freelance writing in December and haven't gone back to it.
Yeah.
It just gets more and more.
Yeah.
So I need to find a way to get some care.
Yeah.
But she did say to say hi.
I haven't seen her in a long, long time.
She's fully retired now, picking up a pension.
That's good.
So yeah, money is no issue. Pension and disability, Social Security.
That's good. That's good. I mean, that's the
You have
one
to
thing.
cajole in some way.
Yeah. At least somebody's making money, because I'm turning out.
Yeah. It's a tough ballgame out there, freelancing right now.
Yeah.
I am.
Pretty much I've given up for a little while longer, looking for full-time work.
There's no staff positions anywhere. Yeah, it's tough.
I got laid off in late 2007 and was looking, and was like, it became real apparent that there wasn't going to be anything. What was out there was going to apparent even less, and for some, in the early 50s.
Yeah. Well, you're competing with all of these laid-off journalists as well, who have been really active in the community, so they know everybody, and, I mean, it's very hard to go up against them because they have 20 years of ties and being out in 15 different places every day, so
The
that,
last full-time job I applied for was at the House Communications
Where
Office.
pops would like routinely
The job was
roast you,
only,
know?
they posted it on our journalism site, nowhere else. He contacted me, who's gonna